Excellent. Dimitri, you got my email. Excellent. Thank you for that. How you doing this morning, man? You doing all right?
I'm a little groggy, but otherwise I'm fine. How you doing?
What is a little groggy? Yeah, we've jumped forward. I'm sorry, we've fallen back in the States. So the time is a little bit off this morning, and I've been a little screwed up myself this morning. How you doing, man? Thank you for joining me. You doing all right?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you, Jamal?
Good. I'm glad that you could join me. Dimitri Lascaris, there we are. He is a lawyer, journalist, activist from Montreal, Quebec. He is also host of Reason to Resist, and he is also the one that beat a Zionist like a drum on the channel last week. I would like to point out that you won that by 89%. Do not ask me who that other percentage was. I don't know who those
were they undecided, or did they say that Daniel won?
It was weird, right? So I was hurrying up putting up the test, the quiz. And so it was like yes and no was already built into it. I couldn't figure out how to get rid of it. So I just put in who is the winner, Dimitri or Daniel. And I think it was like a few percentage says yes, a few percentage says no, and then the other percentage says Dimitri. And I think it might have been 1 or 2% for Daniel. And I'm like, who is this 2%? But there's always 2% for something, right?
Yeah.
It's like, would you like to have head lice? And it would be 2% that says, yes, I would love to have head lice.
By the way, I have to commend you, because afterwards I had the impression he did a lot more talking than me, but I actually checked, and it was pretty close, even though I don't think you were using a timer. So I think you did a very good job of moderating a difficult debate.
I did my best. I tried my best. I didn't want to overly get involved, but it is hard to get involved when you completely disagree with one of the guests. Like when it's like you're sitting here just like, all right, Dimitri. It's like you just want to say something. You want to get involved. I've never heard that argument before. That I've never heard the intent argument made before. And I was like, what? And sometimes I know for myself, when somebody presents something to you that just seems so outlandish that it catches you off guard. And as one of my guests, I think it was Dr. Susan Jacob, she was like, intent refers to why you are doing the killing, not just postulating that you want to do the killing. Like me, like if Daniel is sitting somewhere saying, I want to overthrow the U.S. government, that's not the same thing as somebody overthrowing the U.S. government. Those are two very different things.
Right.
And your intent behind doing it is very different than you just sitting there thinking about doing it. And I was like, yeah, it was a very frustrating argument. But you handled yourself well. You clearly won the day. The audience gave you, I think it was like 89%.
Well, and I was serious, Jamal, if he wants to, because there were a lot of lies he said in that conversation that we did not have time to address. So if he ever wants to continue the conversation, I'll be there.
Well, for one, the Abbas thing is wild to me. It's like you bring up a poll, and after you bring up the poll, you ignore part of the poll. It's like, how are you doing that, right? How are you saying, this is the poll that I'm introducing, but I believe Abbas is more popular than that? Okay, dude, you can't have it both ways, right?
Yeah.
You can't live off the poll and then all of a sudden deny aspects of the poll that you're living off on one other context. No, it was very frustrating, but you handled it well. You handled it well, especially for a limited time debate. You're right, an hour is not enough time to have those debates. Even if you have two questions, the fighting goes into different places that requires time to kind of deal with. But no, man, you handled it well, and I appreciate it. I appreciate you for it. You are a lawyer, and as a lawyer, somebody mentioned to me, Dan Kovalik. So Gustavo Petro in Peru hired Dan Kovalik in order to represent him.
Sorry, you said Peru. I think you mean Colombia, right?
Colombia. I'm sorry. Thank you, Colombia. Thank you. Colombia hired him to represent him in a lawsuit, effectively pushing back against U.S. going after him and his family. And Dan made this point of saying that there's parts of U.S. law that would allow countries to go after the United States for, let's say, murders, killings, etc., those type of things. And you could be a foreign government that goes after the U.S. government for doing so. And we're looking at this notion of Venezuela, what's taking place there, where obviously the United States seems to be lining up for a coup attempt in Venezuela and just randomly murdering people in boats in Venezuela, like in the Caribbean. It's just outlandish, right? But can the same policy be used, let's say, for people in Gaza who no, they can't be used against Israel, but the United States is effectively paying Israel to do this? is there any legal recourse that could be used against the U.S. as a result of its policy in the Middle East? Or it doesn't work that way? It has to be somewhat direct where the United States itself is doing the murdering.
It depends on, the answer to your question depends on the forum. At the level of international law, in international tribunals, there's absolutely a basis to do this. And frankly, I'm surprised. Well, I shouldn't say I'm surprised because of its consistent record of failure, but the International Criminal Court, because of this happening on territory that is subject to the jurisdiction effectively of the International Criminal Court, which is to say the occupied Palestinian territories, okay? Mm-hmm. The court has clearly ruled that it has jurisdiction over this. Israel is not a member of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court,
right?
As is the case with the United States. But the International Criminal Court has said very clearly, we nonetheless have jurisdiction over the occupied Palestinian territories where these crimes are happening. The American government has been aiding and abetting genocide in this area of the world over which the ICC has jurisdiction. It could have indicted Joe Biden, Antony Blinken, Kamala Harris, Jake Sullivan, Rubio, Donald Trump, without even breaking a sweat. It had ample grounds to do that just based on the public statements of the U.S. government. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't even have to do any forensic investigation to persuade, competent, independent judges of the merits of the indictment. So at that level, there's no question that also a state could bring a claim of violating the Genocide Convention and other aspects of international law against the United States government, not against individuals. That's what the ICC deals with, but against the U.S. government at the International Court of Justice, just as South Africa has done with respect to Israel. And I think the only reason that hasn't happened is because people are afraid, frankly. What is the United States government going to do if we pursue it at the level of the ICJ? And that's probably why the ICC hasn't acted either. Now, in the U.S. domestic courts, actually, let me talk about Canada, because I'm not really up to speed on the U.S. domestic legal regime for international law crimes. Okay. But in Canada, we are a member of the ICC, as are the vast majority of Western states. I think virtually all the states in Europe are. And we have legislation which incorporates into law the war crimes provisions and crimes against humanity provisions of the Rome Statute. And any prosecutor here there's ample evidence to indict Israeli and American war criminals and other Western war criminals like Keir Starmer, Rishi Sunak, David Lammy, this freak who purports to be the foreign minister of the UK, all these characters. We could do that in our domestic courts. The problem is that the Canadian government, when it adopted this legislation, I suspect it's very similar in other countries that are part of the ICC, said that you can't pursue a prosecution without the consent of the Attorney General of Canada. And the Attorney General of Canada, that's right.
They're appointed by the executive branch.
Correct. It's a political appointee. And so this has never happened in Canada. Somebody actually tried, by the way. I think you and I talked about this previously. Back in 2011, George Bush was coming to Canada to give a speech. And by that point, it was absolutely clear that the Bush administration, with the consent and authorization of the President of the United States and the Vice President of the United States, had committed war crimes and crimes against humanity. Mm-hmm. And the Attorney General would not give its consent. So a human rights organization here and some victims from Guantanamo brought an application to a Canadian court saying, look, you got to let us proceed here because Bush is coming and the Attorney General won't consent. And the court threw up its hand and said, well, no, I can't, because the law says that that's the only way that one of these prosecutions can be pursued. So this is the problem we have in Canada. I have no doubt that, by the way, I know Dan, I had the pleasure of meeting him in Moscow. He's a great lawyer, great guy. I have no doubt that he's correct, that there are mechanisms of U.S. law even though the U.S. is not a member of the Rome Statute, which would allow these matters to be pursued. But is a U.S. judge going to actually entertain one of these cases? There was an attempt made to pursue the Biden administration in the federal district court last year, alleging that it too, this was the Center for Constitutional Rights in the United States, brought this on behalf of Palestinian Americans, alleging that it violated the Genocide Convention. The U.S. is a party to that statute, and the government invokes something called the political question doctrine, okay, which is just an excuse for the court to throw up its hand, say, this is too hot a potato, don't want to touch it. And the federal judge, a very senior judge in California, said, look, man, you know, I agree with you. I think there is merit to this case, but I am bound by the jurisprudence of the United States Supreme Court to dismiss the action under the political question doctrine.
Wow.
So,
wow, that's disheartening. That's very disheartening. This partition plan that they've come up with in Gaza, this is wild to me. So apparently the plan goes, Israel is going to continue to occupy a large swath of land in some kind of yellow zone that is further encroaching on the area of, well, they're already occupying Gaza, but further encroaching into Gaza. And that they're supposed to get tens of billions of dollars to build up the land that Israel is occupying. Where are they getting this money from? I guess is the first question. And two, do you think this plan is ultimately going to be successful?
The first question, the answer to the first question at this stage appears to be, I suspect Israel would be happy to contribute some money to that enterprise if it's confident that the newly constructed occupied Gaza Strip is not going to be inhabited by Palestinians. So let's just dispense with this idea, this lie that they've been perpetrating, that Palestinians will be allowed to live in a reconstructed part of the Gaza Strip that is not controlled by Hamas. This is absolute nonsense. The settler movement, which is widely represented within the cabinet of the war criminal Netanyahu, has been very clear about this. We want to send back in Jewish settlers to retake that land. It belongs to us. So they're going to, I think they're going to, the Israeli government will find ways of providing the money for the reconstruction of those areas of Gaza to the exclusion of Palestinians. I also suspect, I can't prove it, that a lot of that money would come from Zionist billionaires who have shown, no hesitation in doling out huge amounts of money to take control of media companies and social media companies to disseminate the Zionist propaganda. So would the United States government be willing to go that far? I'm sure there are a lot of people in Congress who would. I have no doubt that Trump would want to do that. The question is, how is the American public going to take a stand for that? Will it do so? There's a lot of growing opposition, as we've talked many times, at the grassroots level, not just amongst Democrats. I don't know if you noticed this, but Candace Owens just did like a 2-hour interview of Norman Finkelstein.
Did she? Oh, he is a warrior. I swear to God, that man is ferocious.
And awesome. Last time I checked, it had just been published. It had over 500,000 views. So, and then there was this event where J.D. Vance, you might have already talked about this, Jamal. He was being asked at some Republican event by multiple people about U.S. support for Israel.
Right.
How is the public going to react when tens of billions of dollars are transferred from the U.S. Treasury to this criminal enterprise? I don't know. Ain't going to be a good reaction, I think. So I'm not sure if the U.S. government is going to go that far. I'm sure there are a lot of people who want to, and we'll have to see. But at the end of the day, the real question here is, in my view, is the resistance just going to sit there and allow the remaining population of Gaza in this even more confined space? Remember that Gaza was already, I think it was the most or almost the most densely populated part of the world.
One of the most, yeah.
And now, even if they have killed, which is likely several 100,000 people, it's going to be even more densely populated. It's completely uninhabitable. I don't think that the resistance is just going to sit there. They still got their weapons. They will resume the fight at some stage. I suspect that Netanyahu is counting on that because, as we saw on October 29th, any kind of resistance when, an Israeli terrorist was killed in the Gaza Strip, Hamas denied it had anything to do with it, but the Israelis said, no, it was a Hamas sniper. They killed over 100 people in 24 hours, including at least 46 children. So I think that was a message. The message was, you kill one of ours, we're going to kill 100 of yours. But eventually the resistance will go back to active combat. They're not just going to sit there and rot.
Yeah, that's rough. I mean, up to this point, what we've seen, I mean, killing 100 people overnight is rather astonishing, especially from the standpoint of, well, there's been a sniper, an Israeli soldier was killed, and from my understanding, they're not even still allowing food coming into the location. Like they've still been blocking the amount of food that's been coming into like support and aid and everything else. Well, Donald Trump has continuously said, we're not going to let them take the West Bank. Do you buy that?
They've taken it. I mean, who are they kidding, man?
Yeah.
You know, I was there in March of last year. I drove all over the West Bank with a Palestinian Canadian friend of mine who lives in Bethlehem. Settlements are everywhere. The wall is everywhere. It's constantly expanding, constantly encroaching. The checkpoints they number in the hundreds, and just going through them is a life-threatening experience if you're a Palestinian. You could die at any time. I mean, you know, who are they kidding, man? He's trying to maintain the illusion. He won't even come out and say, by the way, Trump, you know, you can't annex it because one day this is going to be part of a Palestinian state. He doesn't even go that far. He just don't annex it. He's trying to maintain the illusion that maybe one day there will be a discussion that might lead to a rump state, a quasi-state for Palestinians. At the end of the day, I think right-thinking and informed people can see that for all intents and purposes, Israel has already annexed the West Bank.
So, okay. So why does like all of these countries, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Trump, all of these other people are like, this is our red line. We're not going to tolerate the annexation of the West Bank, blah, 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 blah. Is it just purely for show in this case? I mean, because don't get me wrong, I know they want to annex the West Bank, and you have settlers who are murdering people left and right. I had a conversation with a gentleman who had just been beaten up by a settler. This was like years ago when we were on the radio station. It's heartbreaking, like what those people are effectively living through. I mean, is it, I guess, give me your take on that. How do you think this effectively turns out? I mean, is it just Israel's objective is we will take section by section. So we're going to take a section that we're militarily occupying. We're going to build that up. And then we're going to resume the war. And we're going to take another section. And we're going to build that up. Meaning they're isolating, building up, and then moving forward from the point by which they built up. I hope that makes sense in regards to the way I'm thinking about what it sounds like they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah,
basically forcing the Palestinians into smaller and smaller enclaves.
Yes, in Gaza, I think the plan is, first step in the plan is to consolidate control over the areas that are physically occupied by the Israeli military, because they don't have complete control. For example, a large portion of the tunnel network remains intact, and I'm sure a lot of those tunnels extend into the areas that where there is an Israeli presence. So they're going to have to physically, consolidate iron control over that area. Once they've done that, they will begin clearing. I believe this is the plan. I'm not saying this is what's going to work, right? They'll be clearing the rubble, which in and of itself is going to be a years-long process just to clear the rubble. And then they're going to they'll probably want to erect a barrier. So they're going to move that, the concentration camp fence and all those watchtowers inward, closer to what's left of the Palestinian population. So once they've consolidated control, physically barred any entry by Palestinians into the area of the Gaza Strip that they now physically occupy, they'll begin the task of removing the rubble. Then they'll start reconstructing, and then they will bring in Jewish settlers and other Westerners to live there to the exclusion of Palestinians. In the West Bank, they are doing something similar, but it's a much more complicated process in the West Bank because there's more Palestinians and they're intermingled with 800,000 settlers. But they're trying to move them out into areas that are nominally under the control or shared control of Israel and Palestinian Authority, and confine them in ever smaller spaces. And eventually they are going to do exactly the same thing there. The parts from which they cleanse Palestinians, they will move in Jewish settlers, construct Jewish settlements in those areas, and corral the Palestinians into areas that become increasingly unlivable, with the ultimate objective of them simply dying away or leaving. And to the extent that they can actually kill them, they'll do that, as much as the international community would allow them to get away with. And then they're going to move to East Jerusalem, where the task is much more difficult, because there you have, a much even closer intermingling of the Palestinian and the Jewish population. And then if they succeed in doing that, they're going to move to the 1948 boundaries of Palestine, what is today called Israel, where approximately 20% of the population is Palestinian. And there they'll probably, that in some ways is even easier because they can just drive them, as was done during the Nakba, into southern Lebanon, Syria, just physically drive them into that area. But, from a legal perspective, they have a problem, and that is that those persons are all citizens of Israel, those Palestinians. So they're going to have to work that out. But I think that's ultimately the plan. And I think it's going to fail miserably. I think Israel is going to collapse long before this sinister, sadistic plan is realized. It's going to collapse because of international fury. It's going to collapse because Israel's military right now is a mess, and it's just going to get worse. It's going to collapse because of the economic damage to Israel. So I think they won't get remotely close to fulfilling this plan.
But the international fury doesn't seem to matter.
Well, it takes time for governments to adapt to new realities amongst the population. Look, we've talked about this many times. Yeah. If the governments of the West, who are ultimately responsible for this, without their support, Israel would be toast. This pipsqueak of a country would never get away with anywhere close to what it's gotten away with.
Agreed.
If it wasn't for Western government support, okay? Why do they invest so much time and energy in manipulating public opinion about Israel? Why do they do that? Because they know that if enough people get worked up and angry about it, they're not going to be able to pursue these policies. So right now, I think they're in a very dicey spot. Look, Zohran Mamdani. Okay, the guy's openly saying he's going to arrest Netanyahu, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah.
The mayor of New York, Zionist Central, he's saying that he's going to arrest Netanyahu. And he's poised to win the election.
Yes, he is.
This is a harbinger of things to come. People who have openly professed support for the Palestinian people and who seem to be serious about it are going to win political office, and those who swear fealty to Israel are going to lose. So it's a process that's going to take some time to work out. But that's where we're heading. And that's why Israel is desperate to change the narrative in the United States and other Western countries.
So you see it as a race against the clock, effectively.
Yeah.
That they're trying to effectively get everything that they can under the Trump administration, under the belief that they have a limited window of time to accomplish whatever they're trying to accomplish in the context of this objective.
100%. It's a race against the clock, and they're going to do everything they can to get this done before Trump is out.
From your mouth to God's ears, man. From your mouth to God's ears. Dimitri, thank you for joining me, man. I always appreciate these conversations. I really thank you for catching that email towards the end and popping in for today. Dimitri Lascaris. He is lawyer, journalist, activist from Montreal, Quebec. He is also host of Reason to Resist. Definitely check out his channel on YouTube. Dimitri puts out fantastic content. This is just a taste of Dimitri. Dimitri, be safe, man. Thank you for this.
Peace out.
Have a good one.